This is the video for accelerated geometry on section 2-2 on factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. Our essential question is, how do you factor a trinomial with a leading coefficient other than 1? So we have several steps that we're going to take here. And the first one is to ask yourself, is there a greatest common factor? On any question that you're ever asked to factor, your first question to yourself should always be, is there a greatest common factor? So if I look at 12x squared, 22x, and 8, I know that I can pull out a 2, which would leave me with 6x squared plus 11x plus 4. Our second step is going to be to multiply our a term with our c term. So if you look at the standard form of a quadratic, you have the a comes in front of the x squared, and the c is the last. So if I multiply the 6 with the 4, I get 24. Third step is to find two numbers that multiply to be the number you just found, the product of a and c, but add to be b. So we have to think of two numbers that multiply to be 24 and add to be 11, because in this case our middle term is 11, because we've already factored out the 2. So what are two numbers that multiply to be 24 and add to be 11? And that would be 3 and 8, because 3 times 8 is 24, but 3 plus 8 is 11. The fourth step says to rewrite using the two numbers we just found. So I'm going to carry down the 2. I'm going to carry down the 6x squared. But now instead of rewriting it with the 11x, we're going to replace it with the 3 and the 8. So now this is going to become a 3x plus an 8x, and then we still have that 4. And then the last step is a factoring method, which we will use a lot of throughout this year, and it's factoring by grouping. So we're going to go through each of these steps so you can see what it actually means. It says put the first two terms in parentheses and the last two terms in parentheses. So I'm basically just going to rewrite this by putting the first two in parentheses and the last two in parentheses. Now, don't forget that that 2 is still there. So it's really going to have that extra set of parentheses in there. Okay, then it says to pull out the GCF, the greatest common factor, in both sets. If there isn't one, you're going to pull out a 1. So if I look at 6x squared and 3x, what is the greatest common factor between them? And that is a 3x. So we still have this 2 out front. And within this one, I'm pulling out a 3x. So 3x times what is 6x squared, and that's going to be 2x. 3x times what gives me 3x, and that's going to be a 1. Then what can I pull out between an 8x and a 4? And the answer to that is a 4. A positive 4, might I add. So 4 times what is 8x? That's 2x. And 4 times what is 4? And that's a 1. Now, you should notice that there is one set that is identical. This became 2x plus 1, and this became 2x plus 1. This should always happen. If it doesn't, then you're not factoring it correctly. Something is wrong somewhere in the problem. So then it says the 2 that you pull out become a binomial factor. So I'm going to carry down the 2 that I had before. And it says the 2 that you pull out, so the 3x I pulled out and the positive 4 I pulled out, that becomes a factor. And the common binomial is a factor listed only once. So then my other one is 2x plus 1. So this is the factored form of our original trinomial of 12x squared plus 22x plus 8. Let's try another one. So first question is there a greatest common factor between 3x squared, 11x, and 4? And our answer is no. So we move on to step 2, which means to multiply our a and our c. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. Step 3 says to find two numbers that multiply to be negative 12 and add to be negative 4. I'm sorry, not negative 4, your b, which is 11. So what are two numbers that multiply to be negative 12? And if you need to, off to the side, write all of the factors of negative 12. Well, you would have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So out of all of those, how can I add to be a positive 11? You would need a positive 12 and a negative 1. So step 4 says to rewrite it, replacing that middle term with the two numbers that you just found. Don't leave your x's off because that'll mess you up later. Then it says to factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first two in set of parentheses. And the second two in a set of parentheses. So what is common between 3x squared and negative 1x? I can factor out an x, which leaves me with 3x minus 1. What can be factored out of 12x and negative 4? I can factor out a 3, a positive 3, which leaves me with, oh, I'm sorry, positive 4 is what you need to factor out, which leaves me with a positive 3x and a negative 1. So then it says take the 2 that we pulled out, which in this case is the x and the 4. So that becomes x plus 4. And then the 1 that is the same only gets written once. Now, on number 3, you will notice that it starts with a negative. Anytime it starts with a negative, please factor out a negative 1. So, is there a greatest common factor between 2x squared, 5x, and 3? No. However, it does start with a negative, so I am going to factor out a negative 1, which is essentially going to change all of the signs on all the other terms. So if I go through the steps, we have 2 times 3 is 6. What are two numbers that multiply to be 6 but add to 5? Those numbers would be 2 and 3. So then I'm going to rewrite it. I still have my negative 1 out front. I don't want to forget about that. So that's 2x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 3. Then I'm going to group them. What is common in the first set? I can pull out a 2x, so that's going to be negative 1. Two x times what is 2x squared? X. 2x times what is 2x? That would be a 1. What can I factor out between 3x and 3? And that's a positive 3, which is going to leave me with x plus 1. So my answer would be the negative 1 out front. The 2 on the outside become one binomial. So that's going to be 2x plus 3. And then the 1 that is the same is only written once. So my final answer would be negative 1 times 2x plus 3 times x plus 1. One more. So first question, is there a greatest common factor between 6x squared, 17x, and 12? And the answer is no. However, I do notice that it starts with a negative, so I'm going to factor out a negative 1. So then I'm going to multiply 6 times 12, which gives me 72. So I want two numbers that multiply to 72 and add to be 17. And those numbers are going to be 9 and 8. So then I'm going to rewrite it. I have negative 1, 6x squared plus 9x plus 8x plus 12. Then I'm going to group the first two, so the 6x squared and the 9x, and the last two. So what's common between 6x squared and 9x? I can factor out a 3x, which is going to leave me with 2x plus 3. What's common between 8x and 12? I can pull out a 4, which is going to leave me with 2x plus 3. So then my answer would be the negative 1 times the outside ones get pulled together as 1. And I knew that was a plus because that's a positive 4. And then 2x plus 3. Because then remember that the common one only gets written once.